Hey, this is Joachim Stowe, again, Brooklyn, New York. We're going to record another session of the social ledger. Today, it's the social ledger. It's the intersection of the social ledger and Doug Engelbart. So I came across this interesting piece on Hacker News, which just popped up today, which points back to an article written by Brett Victor, um, back in when was that? 2013. He wrote it. That's when Doug Engelbart died. Um, and it seems to me like, hey, this is this monitor surface. This is like that needed to come back to the surface here and get some exposure to more people. And so let's talk about Doug Engelbart. What we know, what we think, how it relates to the social ledger, and where we go. So we already started the discussion. Michael had some good stuff to say. Gary just mentioned, you guys both coming from the big mainframe computer era, 60s, 70s, right? You did some stuff on the VAC computer, Gary. That's fascinating.
Yes, and the ability to run multiple processes, at will, just spawn another process, and these I took for granted multi-user systems and multi-processing, and then when we got these first computers, first personal computers, they would run basically one process, and to go much further than that, you were asking for trouble. And then we got tools that allow us to do a little bit of multi-processing. And I kept thinking, well, when do we get multi-user? I want to see people sharing the same computer, because it was so convenient to be able to share tools and learn from other colleagues, on the same computers. And I probably learned more then. I was never a real good programmer, but I learned more then than I did in computers from that point on until now, when we can go in these collaborative workspaces and see what others are doing and how they're doing it, and get a feel for process, and where these ideas come from, and so on.
And where they go. More important where they go than where they come from.
Right.
At least personally. What I'm the sense I have is there's a possibility to create Engelbart now. We can write on the top of our systems and simulate or provide a VPN, an environment which is everything that Engelbart talked about. And we do it on the surface of everything, because we don't have to go back and build it from the bottom up anymore. On this transition between devices, the airport in Vancouver had a sound monitoring system that was using a PDP-8 or something. Right? They got this box in the runway area saying how big is it. And they could never get it to work. Every summer they hired a grad student who would toil with this damn thing forever and never produce any data. One year, 3 weeks into the summer, bang, they're getting data. They're getting data. They're getting data. They go over to see what it's about. The guys turned off the PDP-8 and put a Radio Shack TRS 80 on. Right?
Well,
now,
yes.
That's sort of where we are, in the sense that the facilities for upgrading from what was limited in previous architectures. I really love that line in the quote you put up about driving around in assault vehicles, shouting to each other through windows, That we are still trying to coalesce assault vehicles in our world.
Yes, yes.
And that's where I love the social ledger possibility, is that it's bonk, base camp on a new reality, a new virtuality.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's drill down a bit what Brett Victor said in his article that surfaced there on Hacker News, because I thought that was interesting. Because every time you read about Doug, it's about his mother of all demos. It's about the mouse he invented and the hypertext he invented, right? Right.
Well,
So,
and I thought the point about trying to describe Engelbart's vision with terms that didn't even exist back then can lead you to some areas that really we need to be a little more realistic about than that.
right. Maybe we just had to take this long detour here, right? Through going into a whole other corner here, and understand what is really happening before we're coming back to Doug's original vision, to what this could be used. What is it all about, right? So not the whole sort of personal computer era, where you get your thing on your desk, but meaning, well, then you want to protect that thing, right? And this is your stuff and yours only, right? And now you have to start interacting with others, sort of opening little doors here to say, hey, okay, I'm ready and willing to participate here, but this is still mine. This is still the thing. This is my box on my desk here. Versus the vision that he had from the very get-go is, well, there isn't a personal computer. There's an interpersonal machine, right? It's an interpersonal computer. I mean, that's just mind-blowing if you think this way.
Agency. Keep going to the edges. Join the dots. And the dots are now personal devices for the main part. Lack the self-sovereign ID. Excuse me, Gary. It's the sovereign ID stack seems to me the connecting thing that allows you to be totally personal, private, controlled, and be at some level totally or partially in various graduations. And there's a granularity in this that I think takes us from extreme Engelbart to limited Engelbart. Right? Move your slider on your trust and credibility scale or something. But that's for me. It's social ledger. It's tying that to sovereign ID stack and propagating essentially community packages. Well, here you are with these pieces to organize your world.
Right, I think so. Yeah, that's an important component, of course. That's stuff that Jim is looking at that very detailed way. I like for the social ledger, the notion of there's stuff that belongs to me. It's my data. There's this ownership notion. To me, this is more of a navigational thing than it is of a belonging. Sort of. I sort of want to sit on that data because it's mine. It's rather a way to say, hey, let me see what I've worked on last week. Let me figure out the different pieces that I want to move forward. Give me that picture, for my little world here that I'm working on, and navigate through that, right? What's my piece of the ledger, right? Yeah. But the ledger itself, that's this much larger thing. That's this shared computer, right? Because everybody has a piece of that larger global ledger that he or she is working on, right? And we all contribute to that same, effect of we want to build something together here, right? And I'm just being, a part of that. I share my expertise in that space that we're creating for these different teams, right?
Well, this is the collective intelligence of the flight of birds. Like everybody's just doing their thing inside this mesh of simple protocols. Don't get too close, don't get too far. And then you have all that going on, and the collective intelligence of the network you're describing, the intersection of social ledgers. Well, it looks like a good idea, right? I can't see a better one around, because it carries identity and agency and authority and responsibility and accountability at the personal level, and merges it into interactional behavior at a group level. Yes. Without algorithms, without pre-planned, without structure, without the birds will all fly 14 foot apart. Not formation friggin' flying.
That's right.
It's not, and in fact, it's not done by an aerofoil with a jet engine up its ass. That's one way to fly, but there are others.
That's right. That's right.
I was thinking this morning about the teenager who comes home and tells the parent, "But Mom, everybody's doing it," and then the mom says, "Well, if everybody jumped off the cliff, would you do that too?" But there's more to, it's almost the socialization that occurs through seeing what everyone else is doing is much more valuable than we realize. It not only tells you what is knowledge, but it tells you what is common knowledge, and to know the difference is important.
Mm-hmm.
Good line. To know the difference is important. Yeah, that's the knowledge of good and evil, isn't it? There's a tree for that.
We threw out everybody who was using multi-user systems hated them. That we all thought that personal computers would be the solution to everything, and then we realized how much we lost by going that route. But
exactly.
it's interesting that the economics forced us to into the multi-user paradigm at first, and we did what we had to do to make them work. And the dream that what if everybody had their own computer? That was science fiction, right? But then we get them, and now it's economics again. But it's the reverse. It's things have become so cheap that now we can start thinking of building a system that is much more unified and recovering all those things we lost. This is a tool for communication primarily. It's a communication of our ideas, but it's also a communication between each other.
Yes, Gary. I mean, the vision really was there, and it got realized. A PC or a computer on every desk, right? Now everybody got a computer on his or her own desk, right? We had it, we had a machine, but now it seems like now the thing that's running on that machine got sort of taken away from the user again, right? So you became, instead of you becoming a producer, a creator, doing something creative with all these machines and the computing power you had, that creativity was sort of slowly taken away, and you became reverted back to sort of a consumer. You just watched like TV, what's going on this machine, and somebody else was taking care of the data and doing all the data crunching in the background. And it's gone, right? So the vision of that computing power and the creativity you could unleash, with these machines, got slowly sort of diverted again, diffused in these networks, social networks that sprouted up, right? And now it's like, well, maybe there's a there's another wave now, coming back now again, right? So after this, we want to get this creativity, and we want to get this collaborative thinking, and we want to get this intelligence back into these spaces, right? So sort of activate people on maybe a local level to say we want to do these things. I just saw Trevor Schultz, who is running the platform cooperativism thing in New York. He's a professor assistant professor here at the New School in New York. Yesterday, he just launched I don't know if you've seen that, a new platform for his cooperativism movement, right? It's not built yet, but he's sort of on the way and putting on, and the response has been tremendous, right? So finally, here's this kind of platform, built for the people, by the people. They have their own data sets in there. They can control and build whatever they want. And that's like one signpost for me to say, hey, there are things now, on the move that want to bring us back into these creative spaces, co-creative spaces where we build these things together. But the one thing is, it's what you said, Gary, right? The thinking is not there yet. People have to unlearn, unthink. It's like what Brett Victor said at the end of his article, right? If you want to understand what Doug was doing at that time, you have to forget everything you know about computers, right? So you have to even know forget about what a computer is, and then go all the way back to the 60s, right? And then see what his true intention was at that time, right? And then come back and see if you can connect it to what happened today, what's resonating again, right? So maybe with that new thing that's coming up, these new platforms that are sprouting, maybe then, and then the stuff that we're looking at with the social ledger, then you find there's maybe a bridge back to the 60s here, right?
And the bridge is the localization. You see, we're trying to use these asynchronous distant tools to knit together a team of co-working white guys, generally, on technology. Well, this is a very limited perspective with a very little limitation. If you took the tools we're talking about and implement them as a localization for projects, notice boards, facilities, organizations, just get your act together. Here's something like a Mattermost. It could be a riot, but and it's something like there's got to be a social ledger, and there's got to be an articulation of the social ledger, that is, information displays generated from it, and then maybe the community can see itself. But it's not a community of 400 people scattered across a planet. It's a community of, say, 400 people who live in a few square miles of each other, right? And are able to actually meet synchronously and person to person many times in a week. Whoa! So if we take these tools into that context, then I think we've got an opportunity to play with what Engelbart was trying to create. Right.
And I think that's the fundamental part of Trevor's vision there, to build a platform for these co-ops, right? Because,
and he's got $1 million from Google.
That's right. That concerned me a little bit. But it's the Google.org branch, right? So,
well, hey.
It's still $1 million, you say.
I think it's great. I love it. And I've been watching some gathering sort of energies. Everybody's, whoa, that's all, God damn, big sucking sound.
You're right. But keeping the one thing that I'm concerned more about that is it sounded like he hasn't really built that platform yet. So he said at the beginning, I think in June, July, he wanted to get started on building this thing. And it seems like Google is playing an important role in that, not only funding this thing, but also helping in the construction and building of this. But then you immediately go back to, say?
Yeah, I think it's marvelous. Yes.
Yeah, but then, wait. Because then
get on the bus. Don't wait. Get on the bus. Let's go with it.
It's a Google bus. And you know what Doug Rushkoff wrote about the Google bus, right?
He's on or off it, he's going to be throwing rocks.
Right, right. No, what I'm saying is you immediately put into this framework of, well, this is the Google way of collaborating and building these spaces. That means we're going to have some shared documents. We're going to have some Google Drive stuff. They did this already with their educational framework, right? So there's the School of Tomorrow, where they built these online classrooms where teachers can jump in, create their own Google documents, and the kids can then start sharing and working within this Google space, which is good because it's a tremendous step forward, of course, to compare what's happening now today in classrooms, right? Where everybody gets the little assignments and they write it on pieces of paper or submit their own, Word files or whatever, and then they have to string it together. Versus
well, that's a military training project there. The schools are based upon platoon training. You train command and control, isolation, and diminished intelligence.
Right.
That's what schools have always been for. And we imported the personal computer and tablet into that space. Goody. So no, we need collaboration, because it's like learning to dance. Unless you dance with people, you don't learn to dance.
Yes,
and
that's
you get on the bike, you don't bike it.
And one thing about the early days, Engelbart's vision was that everybody operated within academia. He had a very small world he was talking about, and the trust level. And academia has a different set of values about ownership and community, and I learned a new word lately, but basically the ultimate goal of academia is the assimilation and distribution of knowledge rather than profits. And so we've got, and Joachim, you mentioned the other part too, which is ownership. What's mine? Is this work mine? How am I rewarded, whether it be economically or through publish or perish, and that whole business. It's still I've got to have some sort of ownership to this project I'm working on. And so I think there's a part of it is figuring out how to let people feel like they have some sort of ownership of this thing we're building.
Not just ownership, but direction. Ownership takes us back to, what have I got? What's my end of quarter balance sheet say, my credits, got, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's based upon the stocks, the substance. It's like the snapshot that our mentation normally takes of our world. What have I got that I can rely on? Where'd it go? Who's got it next? We're getters in that world. But the thing about the getting world and the having world is that it doesn't mean a bloody thing unless there's flow. It's the flow between the nodes that makes the nodes relevant. If you've got a node, I've got all this stuff, look what I've got, right? And you're not flowing it to and from others, then it's an isolated silo, it's nothing. So functionally, the shift in mentation that I think we need to be enacting and working with is the shift from stocks to flows. Understanding the ins and outs and tos and fros, and making those as transparent as is appropriate in the circumstances, and sometimes very private, please, right? Yeah. I don't want everybody to know everything I am doing. No. Nobody wants to know everything I'm doing either. But so you'd have sectors where you had some degree of transparency, other sectors which are, you'd find out things about yourself that you didn't know.
Yes.
That's when it starts to really cook. So I'm looking for patterns of flow rather than getting pulled back to the old models of asset, control, retention, ownership, property. Now, I'm not saying we'll get rid of property. Let's please not get enemy flagging that. Don't stand in front of locomotives either. It doesn't work.
Yes, but I would rather than property, I would rather be talking about happiness.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Jim often quotes the one study where, they found that if someone makes more than, peak happiness, it seems to occur around an hourly wage of, I don't know, $35 or something. And I'm sure that's relative to whatever economy you happen to be in. But the fact that there is some correlation there suggests that, more is not
Worse,
the answer.
worse.
Yeah.
You remember that curve of, income or wealth, across the United States, how many have got this much and something like that. Well, the inflection is that 35,000 or whatever, because below that, you're sort of sliding up and down a scale, and it's not too bad to go up or too bad to go down. There's movements on a problem. But as you get on the curve and start going up the curve, whoa, I do not want to go down, man.
Yeah.
Help. I want to go up.
I'm sliding. Right.
So
I don't want to go back down in that pit.
Not back. Don't take me back there. So the fear thing cuts in.
Yeah.
When they've got you. This is why the banks have got you when they've got you on a loan thread.
Right.
It's a mortgage after that. It's a bet against your own death. Will you get there before they do?
Well, yeah. Exactly. Let me reflect on a couple of things that you guys just mentioned. It was interesting. The one thing you mentioned, Michael, about moving from stocks to flows, right? There's this guy, J.P. Rangaswamy or so.
Rangaswamy. Yeah. Calcutta.
Calcutta, that's right.
Was with British Telecom.
Yes.
Was the employer of Jeremy Rushton, Tiddlywiki.
Wow. Look at this. Right. So I bring him up because he was writing a lot about moving from knowledge stocks to knowledge flows. Yeah. You can see great pieces, great thinking. That was about, I don't know, 10 years ago he started writing about this. I think when he left the corporate world a bit behind and wanted to do something else and change their minds in that space. So this is something I followed too, the notion of, since I come from a knowledge management perspective, and I've seen the traditional knowledge management structures all anchored around stocks, right? You put it into your repository, you guard it, you safeguard it, and then you give access to that piece, right? Towards this whole movement towards this stuff got to flow, right? If you put it into a box, close the box, it's dead, right? Nothing ever happens again. Nobody ever looks again into that box, right? So this whole movement was very interesting to me to see, hey, this goes from stocks to flows here. What I think also is, these flows have increased dramatically over the last couple of years, especially through the introduction of these chat-based tools, right? Where you not only put the file kind of centric, the document centric material into this, but also the conversations, mix that into the whole conversation space and flow space and the files that are popping up in these spaces. So that increased dramatically and created something like this information overload that a lot of people started to realize. And we can't keep up with this stuff anymore. It's impossible, right? And then other people jumped in and say, well, it's not information overload, it's the filter failure, right? It's the stuff that you do with the information, because you could have walked in a library, the turn of the century, and get information overload, right? same effect. So there's something that you can do about this, and you have to just rethink, reorganize, and find new navigational paradigms to traverse that kind of information landscape. But that was interesting to me, right? You mentioned that from stocks to flows, and to me, maybe the next thing could be what I call knowledge experiences. So you actually experience that kind of knowledge that you're talking about, not just writing it in a book, reading it in a book, or sharing it in these fast-flowing streams, but actually experiencing it. The notion of riding a bike versus reading about the bike is very important. So that, I think, will surface here too as sort of the next thing about the flows, the experiences that you can get out of this, which then hopefully draw in more people back into, okay, the streams were too fast for me. The stocks I never looked at, whatever that was, right? But the experience, I want to have that experience, of course. I want to be there, be present, be with my friends, do something creative together, right, in these new spaces. And you give me the right tools and opportunities, and you point me to the right choices that I can take. Well, so be it. That's great. Let me come back now, right? Sort of let me dust off my old PC from the corner, bring that back here, and see if we can open up that space here and realize, hey, there's other people in the same space wanting to play and wanting to figure out what's really happening. So the human-to-human communication coming back, right, to sort of, that's what we originally wanted to do. And Gary, your point, sorry, about academia, right? I mean, academia went through a similar detour here, you know. If you look at institutions today, especially in the US, they're highly hierarchical, right? They're worse than corporations, right? Where you have these guys sitting on top, and you have your career inside academia. You have to really, you know, act up to serve everyone, to even have a kind of a career in that world. Same with the distribution of knowledge that sort of was taken over by these publishers, right? All these publishing houses have grabbed on these pieces and sold them for very expensive subscriptions back to the universities, right? So there's a similar thing was happening there, you know, taking away that originally notion of they are the places to gather to share the kind of knowledge, the distribution of knowledge, their function, right? Taken away by these other things that were happening inside in their environment. So maybe what I'm saying is maybe they're also ready to say, hey, we are sick and tired of this, you know. I mean, we already see these more distributed and open paper sharing, you know, where scientific papers, you can share them openly without going through these big publishing houses. But maybe they're also ready for this sort of intellectual jump towards, hey, there's something we're actually thinking through together, and this is a shared thing, rather than this is a commercialized thing and we're making a lot of money out of this. So they could be at that similar stage, right, where they're waiting for this new platform or new thing to happen, that brings our thinking now back to the 60s, right, for Engelbart's, towards more of Engelbart's vision. No? I don't know.
You do. You just said it.
Yeah.
You asked, does social ledger bring us closer to Engelbart's vision? And yeah, I came back into this space not at the level of social ledger, although it was what I could see at the level of the language, you know, like Archain's Rolang or Ethereum doing the same sort of things with distributed computation. You know, that's, to me, that's the very lowest level that handles it actually handles the technical problems that come about when trying to do distributed computation and multi-user sharing of resources. But the distributed computation for me was only a means to an end, and I see social ledger as being the place that we try to you know, reinvent the space or the vision of collaboration and you know, goal sharing and resource sharing. And another thought I had was, you know, this idea of, and I kind of want to drop the monkey metaphor, but Jim is often talking about monkey see, monkey do. And, you know, you mentioned, you know, the information overload, and people are saying, oh no, you're just not filtering properly. But when I came back into this space, I definitely thought there is no way I can deal with all of these newfangled things that are coming about. But I discovered that I could accelerate my learning by just sitting in these chats and watching other people use the tools. And I realized that, it's not overwhelming at all. Once you see it once, and it's just like, it's so intuitive that it's wonderful. And so
until that is realized, until that is made, until somebody actually experiences that, before that, they're in the veil of confusion, and it's awful, and I don't want to learn anything. Oh God, another protocol, another procedure. So you've got to be brought through it, which is what the onboarding is all about. You got to onboard people into this. Come on, let's play. Get something happening. Which means it's going to be fun. Now, for you, Gary, it's fun watching other people learning and doing things and whatever, you see. John Grant, he's fascinated what's going on. He just loves checking in to see what the hell's going on. Right? He's learning so much from the process that's happening. Likewise, but you got to be there and do it to get it. Yeah. So what we need are social ledger tools that play at a community level.
Yes.
In the real world, it's got to be, this is how my town is organized.
Yes.
Then you'll get people playing and effects and consequences. It's like the ledger is the vehicle, and it needs its own carrier. It needs its deliverable. There needs to be a deliverable inside the social ledger thing, which really attaches to what people live and do day by day.
Yes, Michael. I mean, it's this. I mean, there's a tremendous sort of adaptive capability of the brain, right, on an individual basis. As Gary said, you can adapt to that, and you can really starting to adopt new ways of making sense and figuring out what's important, what not. And suddenly things become clearer, right? So it's a clearing up of this foggy landscape where you thought is overwhelming and too much initially, but it's actually not, right? But you have that adaptive capability. But you also have to develop this adaptive capability on a collective level, right? So it's not you as an individual, but once we're together in that space, whoa, what do we do? How do we make decisions here, right? These are all familiar themes, right? I keep coming back into these spaces, right? And they work, again, I mean, Mike, I think they work pretty well in a sort of cooperative, localized, community-based environment, because you're there, you have to solve problems or it just falls apart and you can't let this happen, right? So you're forced to do things, right? It's a bit different story if you go into purely virtual environments where there's only like a thematical aspect to that. So there's a dotted line around the community, like the Digital Life Collective, right? So there's a dotted line around what that thing is, what we're trying to, talk about. And then you see a lot of this divergence happening. I mean, I think that space is much, much harder to come up with good decision-making processes, right? Good ways of distributing the knowledge and getting everybody on the same page, right?
I think one of the things there is that we should refrain as much as possible from putting good processes in place.
Huh.
If the network has its own intelligence will manifest as the decisions that are made out of what it is. We don't all have to go to Lumio to decide something, for instance. I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, and it's a good, effective tool and so on and so forth, but the flock of birds doesn't work that way. The natural world does not work that way.
We're seeing that when our chain is all hung up about voting on things. Vote on this, vote on this. And then every time we get enough people together to finally get the votes done, I mean, it's mechanical. It's like, $2,000, but but the point is, it's the conversations before the vote that where the real valuable.
It's the conversation. It's the ones outside. You see, one of the problems we get when we think, let's cooperate. Well, what are we going to cooperate on? And we've got to find something to do that we can all contribute to in some relatively equitable way, or what, you know. Those things don't exist. What does exist is the interaction of multiple small actions of mutual support and interaction in a convergent network, resonant network. That creates commonwealth without anybody doing anything except looking after themselves and their buddies. Because the acts build into a mesh of benefit. You know, it's like, you know, there's a thing called the reciprocal roof. If you Google the images on reciprocal roof, you'll see that it's things supporting each other, and it works around, and look, it supports itself. Right? And we make the mistake often of saying, well, we've got to build something where we're all, you know?
Yeah, structure. Walls.
And then how many walls? Where? How high? You know, and so it gets very, and these people don't want a community garden. These people don't want an old person's home. These people do want, you know, and so you've got all this, which shall we decide upon? Well, actually, the easiest way to see what happens.
Yes, provide them with as many possibilities as possible, and then whichever ones they use, we expand upon those.
They manifest. This is permaculture. Permaculture, this is biomimicry, this is the whole game of systems. Probe and watch.
Yes, probe and watch. That's right, Mike. Yeah. The thing is there, you can actually watch. You can see that something happens, right? And if you make a mistake, then nothing happens and something dies, right?
Big hammer. Smack. What's happening?
But so again, in these spaces, there's a clear goal, right? So you want to grow a vegetable garden, right? You want to fund a local business, you know? There's really established goals, and it makes sense, and you can then group around that and say, okay, what are the steps to get this stuff done, right? The virtual spaces, if you don't have these clear goals, I'll give you one example. I've just joined Dave Gray's stuff called the School of the Possible, right? So he is building an entirely new school. So that's the starting point, right? Rethinking what school, what education, what learning means, right? And then coming up with some ideas to build this. So he set up that space, and right now, suddenly, you know, we had some initial big conversations and it's great, and let's do it and go for it. Now it's quiet. Now it's like everybody's looking at a blank page and agreeing, yes, there's going to be this thing called School of the Possible at some point, right? But it's silence right now. It's like deafening silence, and you feel like, okay, we got to do something here. You know, someone has to jump in and have some ideas, and then we get the ball rolling again, right? But it's really hard to sort of hold this thought for a while, and then coming back and re-engaging, and then coming up with some coherent thinking in this space to say, hey, we're building this thing, right? If it's not as concrete as, you know, funding a local business or growing a vegetable garden, right? It's a different story. If that's an abstract concept you're talking about, right? That you want to build together. So hard
to nail down abstractions.
Yeah.
They go all over the world. It's like writing on wet tissue paper or something. It doesn't work. You can't get anything that builds out of it.
No.
There have to be concrete, realizable, real-time consequences. A vegetable garden is a perfect sort of mix for that sort of process, or a common building, a barn raising. You know, let's all get together and put up the barn, are so much part of our cultural archetype. We know these things, so
yes,
you know, it has to be done and felt. People have to be. They have to use their head, their hands, and their heart. You know, it's got to be all the pieces.
Yes, be in there, be present, you know, experience that thing again. That's that experience again, right? So Gary,
I discovered this philosopher this morning, and I put a quote in the channel. His name is Hans Weihinger. I don't know if either of you have heard of him. I had not. But his thing is, or his catchphrase is, the philosophy of as if.
Like it.
Yeah. And I, in light of that as if ideation, when I first came to the social ledger, I behaved as if I understood what the social ledger was and Dig Life was and Tech We Trust. You know, I behaved as if I understood what it was, and I did a lot of things, and many of them people didn't like, but I had a great time and learned a lot. Now I realize that what I behaved, as if it was probably not correct, and my as if is now changed quite significantly, but because I did believe that it was, something, and I had a vision of what the goal was and how to go about doing it. It spurred me to action.
Yes, that works.
Yeah, and I think what we see is people, but then as I started to realize, well, wait a minute, it's a little bit different than I thought, and so I start backing off and doing like the people in the School of the Possible, or you say that they seem to be doing now. It's like, well, if it was that, why aren't more people doing this? So I think, we've got to provide some, as ifs for people to behave against, or with the aid of, suppose things were this way, and
Yes.
What could we do if things were that way? And then, possibilities start suggesting themselves right away.
Yes, absolutely right, Gary. I mean, this whole as if thinking, we got to reinstitute that and make that more common. I mean,
we do it all the time.
We do it. It's embedded in us, right? We have it.
Embedded. We think as if we're screwed. We're doomed.
Okay.
We know nothing. We think as if. We do not have to learn the technique. We just have to be a little clearer about what we're looking at.
Yes, that's the negativity of that, right? So, and that seems to roll much faster than the positivity of the as-ifs, right? As if, pretending we could do something like that, and then how do we get there? It's like as if, this is the end, and let's prepare for that, rather. Right?
Yeah, well, we carry the negative expectations. If you go up to a dog expecting it to bite you, it might. So I mean, it's like we approach the world with an as if frame. The trouble is we don't even know we do.
Yes, right. But we can actively just say, well, that's the way things work. We think we know.
He got it from Kant and Nietzsche.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Can and do, rather than Kant and Nietzsche.
Well, that was interesting. I mean, do you know that for a fact? Because he was a student of Kant and Nietzsche.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Wikipedia.
Oh, okay.
I've come across this guy, and yeah, I love it. He's got exactly the shift of willful focus. We choose what we look at. We're already choosing what we look at. We've just got to notice the choices we're making.
Yes.
Just
Right.
no, it's a bit more than that. But start with notice the choices we're making at what we're looking at.
Wow, Michael, I'm signing up. Where can I sign up for your course?
omcc.atlets.net.
Good.
omcc.atlets.net. Yeah.
Let's broadcast
And I
this.
put a link in the social ledger about some historic version of that too.
Cool.
It involved somebody called JP working with a company called BT.
The good old telecoms. I wanted to circle back from Nietzsche and Kant back to Brett Victor. So make a little jump here, because Brett wrote another interesting piece, more recent, not the one from 2013, but this a couple of weeks ago, where he was talking about maker spaces. So he's a person who likes to sort of visualize things, right? That's this thing. He likes to sort of graph things, instead of writing it on a dead piece of paper, he wants to sort of come the paper alive and then show you all these kind of visuals and graphs and what it actually means, what the numbers are describing and showing you there. But he said something interesting recently, where he looked at maker spaces and said, well, maker spaces, they produce things. So you put machines in there, they create stuff. They're converted from matter A to matter B, and you have something at the end. And he said, that's kind of the wrong approach they're important, these maker spaces, but we need something else right now for us. And he calls it the seeing spaces. And I thought that was very interesting. So instead of maker spaces, we need to build seeing spaces. And by that, he means you put something into a seeing space, and then that thing that you put in there sort of projects, in his vision, on walls, right? It's what that thing is doing and why is it doing this thing, right? And you can project it over time. So why is it reacting? His example is like a small bot here. He loves bots too, Gary. And he puts the bot in the space, and there's a light source, and then the bot supposedly sort of move towards the light source, right? And it doesn't. It moves in the opposite direction. And then his seeing space would now tell you, okay, exactly why it would move into the opposite direction. You can see some graphs and charts and all the analytical things that are coming out of the data you can capture about that thing, right? Visualize that and show that for you. And for me, this is typical Brett Victor stuff, because he likes to dig deep into these data sources and output things. To me, is what if you take this notion of seeing space and put it on a higher level, on a more conceptual level, right? So have people, groups coming together and begin to see things in a different context, right? Give them the tools where they can actually see things better, sort of the visualization tools for conceptual work, stuff that already exists out there. You can trees and branches and graphs. You can all plot this out, but in a way that it connects deeper with people, right? I think that's one of the core aspects of the social ledger. To bring it back now, circling back all the way to the social ledger, that we want to create similar seeing spaces inside the social ledger, right? So these, again, spaces. There's a defined context of a space. Why are you here with your 5 team members, and where you're going, where you're climbing next, and sort of the tool sets that you can build around it. So expose the current thinking of the group, project that on the wall and say, here's what we currently think, here's what we agreed upon, here's our common vision where we could buy in and say, yes, that's something to move forward, to get consensus on, to have all the conversation, exposed more explicitly, and say, this is the thing we're doing. So the seeing spaces, to me, is again another aspect of the social ledger, right? So putting that into context, and everything sits on top now of, circling all the way back to what you said at the very beginning, Michael. So this notion of a ledger, a container where this data is captured, right? But it's data for everyone to make use of, right? And the bigger that container is, the more people we can encourage to put into this shared social ledger to also make sense of that data, right? It's all about the data and the flows that we can now instantiate out of this social ledger, right? Because it's a global ledger. It's a ledger that's supposedly accessible by anyone who participates in this.
You want to participate. People have got to want to participate.
Well,
a loop that gives a feedback that takes you forward. If it's a task and it's boring or it's abstract, no go. So the juice, there's a deliverable, has to be inside this package that makes it attractive, ubiquitous, penetrating.
Uh-huh.
There's got to be the meme that really moves it. What's the meme? Now, I'm pretty clear. You may have heard me talk about it before. It's community monies that move stuff around and have people do things with each other.
Yeah.
Because when they do things with each other, they're doing things with each other. I like that idea. So I'm seeing social ledger, and have done since I first got the wind of your thinking. I'm seeing it as the absolute delivery vehicle. I'm just looking at the PDF from Seeing Spaces at the moment. I've left a link on our chat too.
Okay.
Yeah, we need Seeing Spaces. And,
we need Seeing Spaces.
We got to put them together and give them the cherry on the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
When I left college to go to work in industry, I was really disappointed that there was not more teamwork and team learning than I saw. It sort of was my big turnoff to wanting to work in that space.
Oh.
I was in and out of Shell in 18 months out of university. 18 months in that space, and I could feel that I was in some sort of a militaristic, mechanistic, structured bullshit box. And I could already tell, and that was in the 60s, we were not in the right business. And things were happening around the world under the name that were despicable. Nigeria was the big one at that time. But hell, it goes on, doesn't it? Just keeps going on. The beast goes on. So we need new beasts. We need our little baby unicorns of the rainbow generation or something. We need to be born again into a new seeing space where it all works and we don't have to worry. I'm delighted at the material that you've pulled together here. I think we're cutting to the chase here. We're getting down to the details that count. So.
Yep. We're adding more stuff, more interesting things, and just like today's conversation on Doug Engelbart's work, that suddenly popped up, and we suddenly immediately see so natural the overlap with the work we've been doing, right, in the past years, right? So that's great to see. Let's do more of it. Okay, guys, let me stop the recording here for a second. I'll put some links into the recording for everybody who sees this later, so you can follow what's going on in the article we were talking about here. But thanks, everyone.